Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Growing more with less is the mantra of Nebraska's corn farmers, and they're using incredible technology to do it. Soil moisture monitors let them know when their crop needs water and how much. GPS systems eliminate overlaps in the field, saving fuel and money. New hybrids reduce the use of pesticides and increase yields. When you're talking new technology and innovation, Nebraska corn farmers are all ears. Nebraska's family corn farmers, sustaining innovation.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Bridget Nelson. On this episode, Mike Briggs looks at cattle markets. Steve Johnson shares a few market strategies. Bryce Anderson gives a weather update on Argentina. And Jessica Groskopf talks about how the Women in Agriculture Conference can be beneficial for women producers. Mike Briggs is our market analyst this week. Live cattle future prices dropped in the market over the past few days. According to Mike, the reasoning for this price drop could be due to a possibility of an overabundance of market-ready cattle during the months of May and June. Mike calls this overabundance a cattle tsunami. However, since May and June are prime months for demand, and currently there is a short supply of market-ready cattle, this tsunami of cattle could benefit the market. We met with Mike Wednesday morning and talked to him about cattle inventory, beef demand, and how cattle supplies could be impacted by the Argentine drought.
Live cattle futures have been operating primarily on what they believe the future is going to be, i.e. the futures market. There is a perceived belief that come May and June there's going to be a cattle tsunami of market-ready cattle. That may or may not be true. That's what we thought was going to happen last fall, and it never really did appear. But it does kind of seem like we're going to have a pretty good supply of fat cattle going into May and June. Now, how much concern does there need to be? That's also your best demand time of the year, so I don't know how whooped up everybody needs to be, but the funds that trade the board and the people that trade the board, that's what they're looking at, is that particular situation. And they're paying very little attention to what's going on right now, which is pretty short supply of fat, market-ready cattle.
Demand and supply also impact the futures prices. However, Mike is still more concerned about the possibility of an overabundance of cattle.
Yeah, it's basically demand and supply situation. What I'm talking about is a perceived overabundance of cattle in the future, and I think now is a time that as cattle feeders, if we can be a little tight-fisted with our present fat cattle, the packers making a lot of money, demand is really good, so they've got the money they could share. We just need to be a little bit tougher-fisted and force this thing up, because I think we can. I think we're sitting in a pretty good situation here for the next 45 days.
We also asked Mike if adding tariffs to steel and aluminum would affect U.S. beef exports.
Yeah, there's some talk about what our president might do about steel and aluminum tariffs. Does that really affect us? No, but typically a lot of times if some other country wants to retaliate, that's the first thing they do is slam agricultural products, which would be really disappointing. You know, the dollar is down, the value to that exporter is really good as far as beef exports. I think beef exports are going to continue, and I think demand is in a really good spot right now.
In addition to tariffs, we asked if the Argentine drought would eventually have an impact on cattle feed prices.
You know, the drought in Argentina has got a lot of different opinions. Yeah, it's a really bad drought. They're getting really slammed, but there's people that think for every bushel they lose, Brazil has gained it. I don't know if that's true, but it is pressuring proteins, especially bean meal. So when bean meal gets high, people start switching over to distiller's grain. That started to go up, which puts pressure on our margins because our feed costs are going to go up. Do I think it's going to be anything substantial? Maybe not at this time, but I don't see it as a problem that's going to go away, because if you look at the long-term forecast, I think we're going to have a dry spring here, and that's going to make everybody nervous, which could quite possibly chase things a little bit higher. They're talking like this weather might not change precipitously until June. Well, if it's a dry spring, you're going to see people get really nervous.
Then there are cash prices. According to Mike, he's a bit bullish about this topic.
Well, it's like we talked a little bit earlier. I think I'm bullish cash prices. I'm talking my position a little bit, but I'm bullish cash prices. But I think we as producers are going to have to try to hold the Packers' feet to the fire a little bit. He's got lots of margin. He could share a little bit, but obviously he's not going to unless we force him. I think demand is good enough. And like I said earlier, I know there's this perceived tsunami of cattle coming to the market later on. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But I think we can force this price higher here in the short term for a little bit. Then, yeah, we may struggle a little bit in May and June, but if the market gets good enough now that we can pull some supply forward, that lessens the impact of that going forward. So I think cash here, I'm bullish. I'm pretty bullish markets here for the next 30, 45 days. Then I think we may struggle a little bit. Now, having said that, you go on further, like say into the fall, you've seen a lot, and what this tsunami of cattle is coming from is a lot of cattle have been sent to feed yards early because of the drought, and there's not much wheat for these cattle to graze on. So those cattle have already come to the feed yard. So then the market's going to be faced with, well, typically those cattle are placed in April and May. Well, now you're going to have probably a decrease in placements in those months. Therefore, you're going to have a shortage of market-ready cattle, probably Nov Dece, kind of in that fourth quarter. So I think there's some things going through. It's kind of like we're going to go through kind of a little struggle period, and then I think this thing can rally back and be pretty good in the fall, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of cattle in the fall.
Next week, Elaine Cub will join us to look at corn and soybean markets. In our last episode, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Farm and Ag Business Management Specialist Steve Johnson brought awareness of the crop insurance March 15th deadline. In this week's episode, we continue Steve's interview with a few of his market strategies for both new and old crop. Steve recommends farmers have a written market plan containing both a time objective and price objective. We sat down with Steve late February at the Farmers and Ranchers College's Crop Insurance Farm Bill Policy Update and More workshop to learn more about these market strategies.
Pre-harvest marketing is really key, and crop insurance is a part of that pre-harvest marketing strategy. So by taking revenue protection, you're guaranteed your actual production history, which is a 10-year simple average in most cases of when you grew that corn or soybean crop on that farm or farms. It's your APH times your level of coverage. And most farmers in Nebraska, I would anticipate, use 75, 80, or 85% level of coverage. That is your yield guarantee. But when you take revenue protection, you get to multiply your yield guarantee times the projected price, the simple average of December corn futures, November soybean futures in the month of February. We call that the projected price. We don't know that number until around March 1st or March 2nd, but under revenue protection, you get the higher of the projected price, that simple average in February, or the harvest price, the simple average in October. That guarantee of revenue is critical. That allows you to pre-harvest market those bushels that are guaranteed and trying to sell when the futures price is above the projected price. For the last 5 years in a row, that projected price turns out to be higher than the harvest price, which is the importance of having a pre-harvest marketing plan that matches up with your cash flow needs in the fall and winter, and especially on-farm versus commercial storage, trying to keep these extra bushels out of commercial storage and having some sort of a plan, whether that be a hedge through a commodity broker. More common is a hedge to arrive, working with your grain merchandiser, committing bushels to delivery, but not setting the basis on those bushels. Hedge to arrive are very common, especially when combined with revenue protection crop insurance.
According to Steve Johnson, Nebraska farmers are probably sitting on the largest volume of unpriced corn they have ever had. Due to this, Steve recommends farmers have a market plan for old crop corn and soybeans, containing both a time and price objective. For a time objective, he recommends taking advantage of uncertainty.
Taking advantage of uncertainty. In the winter, South America uncertainty for soybeans, and especially in the spring for both corn and soybeans, corn tends to rally into April, May, June and peak. Soybeans can often peak in the winter with South America uncertainty because the majority of soybeans are now grown in the southern hemisphere. So having a time objective and a price objective, and that price objective will include futures price minus expected basis, and then some sort of a profit margin. But I would anticipate that we will likely see a rally in the late winter and spring months for corn because of weather uncertainty in the U.S. that will slow their planting progress and likely give us an opportunity to get additional bushels, both old and new crop bushels, priced.
It is important to have a market plan for old crop, but it's also vital to pay attention to new crop price objectives.
I think as far as new crop price objectives, for soybeans, we're there. I've been using 10, 10.10, 10.20, 10.30 per bushel. November, new crop soybeans. I think the better basis opportunities will likely be in late November, December. For a farmer that's delivering to a processor, he's going to have to negotiate that basis probably late summer. And we're going to have wider than normal basis, as I anticipate we're going to plant more beans in 18 than we did in 17. For corn, my price objectives are probably more in line with this $3.95 to $4.15. I think we'll rally corn. It'll be primarily based on the uncertainty of planting and the cold, wet conditions in the northern and eastern corn belt. We'll plant less corn, but our ending stocks are over 2.3 billion bushel, the largest number of bushels that we've had in 30 years. So I'm encouraging the farmers to lower their expectations. We call that the Hawkeye strategy in Iowa. So lower your expectations for the 2018 crop. We've got large ending stocks of both corn and soybeans. And even though we'll have fewer corn acres planted, I would anticipate that with growing conditions forecast to be ENSO neutral during spring and summer, then transitioning to El Nino, our good growing conditions, farmers will want to take advantage of the uncertainty, especially weather uncertainty in South America in February and early March, and then in the northern hemisphere in April, May, June. But having a marketing plan in writing with price objectives and time objectives. Again, I'm using 10 to 10.30 per bushel November soybeans. I'm using $3.95 to $4.15 December corn.
As Steve mentioned, he also recommends producers have a pre-harvest market strategy containing revenue protection crop insurance. You can learn more about the insurance on the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach website at extension.iastate.edu. According to the USDA WASDE report, Argentina's soybean production is forecast at 47 million tons. That total is down 7 million from last month, mostly due to lower projected yields, resulting from dry conditions through much of the growing region in January and February. The USDA also notes Brazil's soybean production is raised by 1 million tons to 113 million. Due to the ongoing Argentine drought, we met with DTN Senior Ag Meteorologist Bryce Anderson Wednesday afternoon and asked him for an update on Argentina's weather conditions.
Well, Argentina is dry, and the next week to 10 days are going to see a few showers over the central crop belt, but really not anything to end the dry problem they have. I mean, we're looking at maybe a half an inch of rain total over a 7-day period in central Argentina. And we're at a point now where that's not enough to completely change things around. So any benefit is going to be very brief.
We further asked Bryce how La Nina has influenced this Argentine drought.
Well, La Nina in the Pacific, where the water temperatures in the equator went to a below normal value, a cool value at the last fall in November, has a very high relationship to dry conditions in Argentina. It's almost 100%. And with La Nina not only developing, but then kind of reaching its full intensity in January and February, that really enhanced the dryness in Argentina. And there are some places now in their central crop belt where it's the driest that it's been in 70 years. And the outlook for their soybean production is down as a result. The soybean prospects are about a third less than we were looking at back on January 1st. And that is all strictly due to this La Nina enhanced drought.
According to the USDA March WASDE report, the season average soybean price range forecast of $9 to $9.60 per bushel is unchanged at the midpoint. So the question remains, how long will Argentina have a drought?
Well, I think the damage has been done as far as this big drop that we've seen. And I don't think that we are going to see much of an improvement basically from here through the end of their growing season. They're going to start harvesting now in about 2 weeks. Some early harvesting has actually been going on. And I don't think that they're going to be able to get enough rain to make any kind of a recovery. So the damage has definitely been done.
So what is the difference between La Nina and El Nino?
The Pacific might go to warmer temperatures with an El Nino developing by next fall. That is a possibility. If it does, and then if it lasts then through the end of this calendar year, 2018, and goes into the winter of 2018 and 19, then that would be more favorable for the Argentina weather pattern at that point. And maybe their problem would just be a one-year event, and they would have better conditions next year with more rain. Generally, the Pacific does, kind of fluctuate, go back and forth between the cool La Nina values and the warmer El Nino values. It's not a real definite time frame for that to go on. So that's the reason why there's still a little bit of caution on the prospect for warmer temperatures in that equator region of the Pacific to develop during the rest of this year.
According to the USDA, Brazil has 2 seasons for corn production. The first crop is planted in September, while the largest second season crop is planted after early season soybean harvest, usually from January to March.
Well, I think the biggest impact that we're seeing in the Brazil weather pattern is that where Argentina has been very dry, Brazil has been wet. They've had very generous rains. And at this point, that rain is allowing for soil moisture to build up for planting the second corn crop, or as they call it in Brazil, the safrinha crop. It's 70% of the Brazil corn crop. And one thing that the continued rains are doing is the rainfall is providing soil moisture that maybe will keep producers a little bit more encouraged to continue planting corn a little bit later than their ideal time frame, just because the rains have been going on. So it looks like the moisture is going to be there for having a decent second corn crop.
Next week, UNL graduate research assistant Tara Hartman will join us to discuss research conducted on bacterial leaf streak. Despite housing costs below the national average, Nebraska continues to be among the top 10 in the U.S. for highest property taxes. In 2017, WaltHub ranked Nebraska 7th in the country for highest property tax rates. Learn more about how the changes in Nebraska's state aid formula and the ag economy allowed Nebraska to receive these rankings in the March Nebraska Farmer. Every February, women producers come together to learn more about how they can improve their farm or ranch operation at the Women in Agriculture Conference held in Kearney, Nebraska. The Women in Ag Conference is a 2-day event filled with over 30 concurrent workshops that help women learn how to better manage risk, improve their farms and ranches, and become more successful operators and business partners. The WIA conference averages over 325 attendees each year. We talked with Extension Educator for Agricultural Economics, Jessica Groskopf, at this year's Women in Ag Conference to learn more about how this conference benefits women producers.
So the Women in Agriculture Conference is held every February, and this year's theme is growing our future and valuing our traditions. And we're looking to the future, but still keeping on to that agricultural heritage that we all have. So we see that when we have traditional meetings where we have both men and women together, that the women are a little bit quieter and they're not really willing to ask those questions. So the Women in Agriculture Conference is really for women to come together and learn about the topics that affect their farm or ranch operations. And they get to interact not only with experts in teaching, but also network with other women who are in similar situations. When you're on the farm or the ranch, sometimes it's hard to explain everything that's stressing you out to someone who doesn't have that background. So this is that opportunity for women to come together and to talk with one another and share their experiences.
One of the goals of the Women in Agriculture Conference is to have women producers feel more confident about how to manage their farm or ranch after leaving the conference.
If nothing else, I want them to be able to find the resources that they need and get those questions answered that they have. You know, when you walk into the FSA office, or you walk into your banker, or you walk into your crop insurance agent, how do you ask the right questions and know that what you're signing is what you intend to sign? And so being comfortable in saying, what is this? Or, you know, is there a better way to do something? And having that comfort and that confidence to make those direct connections, or find someone within the network that they met here to ask those questions to.
The most valuable aspect of Women in Agriculture is allowing women producers to build networks with each other.
We see that the most valuable thing is that women build these networks of people that they get to know here at the conference. So whether that's with the presenter or with women from their area, we always put the women's hometown on the name tag so that they can start to connect with those who are close to them and start to kind of build those friendships. We also see that the younger women like to connect with the older women and understand and learn from those experiences that they've had, because some of the challenges we have are not new. They're continuing issues we see in agriculture. And you know, as we look at the financial climate, a lot of the women who are here survived the farm crisis of the 1980s. And although we're not in the same situation, we are seeing a financial crunch right now. And so it's great to have that opportunity to connect with those who have been through a similar experience.
Now with this week's weather forecast, here's Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast. The big weather story, of course, during this last 7-day period was the storm system that moved in late last weekend and then carried through Monday and Tuesday as it departed toward the Great Lakes. We've seen some pretty significant snowfall accumulations across the eastern Dakotas, western Minnesota, where we had full-range blizzard conditions, and some of that did extend down into extreme northeastern Nebraska. For the most part, though, once you get south of northeast Nebraska, much in the way of precipitation just wasn't there. We had a few trace amounts of snowfall. And then, of course, as we got into Tuesday morning, a little bit of snowfall moved down eastern Nebraska on the backside of that upper low to give us another ½ inch to 1 inch accumulation caused from very slick conditions. But overall, that system is out of the way. We've seen a warming trend. And before we get to the main forecast, though, because of the lack of snowfall in the southern Rockies, I want to bring you up to date on how the snowfall estimates are and where we are in terms of the latest drought monitor. So if we go to the latest snow depth information for the Rocky Mountains, one thing I'll draw your attention to is you get into southern Colorado and points to the south, we're running anywhere from 20 to 60% of normal snowpack, depending on location. And we are also seeing that all the way up through the Sierra Nevada region, and it takes you all the way up into the southern Cascade region, where we've seen significant below normal snowpack. And when you think about the storm that come in last weekend, dropping 7+ foot of snow in parts of the northern Sierras, that basically doubled the water equivalency of their snow. So they're running on the statewide basis 5 inches of water equivalency. The storm comes in, we jump up to 10 inches of water equivalency. Unfortunately, for this time of the year, we should be up to 25 inches of water equivalency. So one big storm doubled their snow water equivalency, but yet we're still well below normal. And unfortunately, we're going to have to see several strings of these storms coming through for us to improve the conditions in the southern plains, because we have a widespread drought signature over the western Oklahoma, Texas, and into the southwestern United States. So there is evidence some more systems will be coming through, may start to improve the situation slightly, but I think that we're going to be dealing with this issue in the southern plains through the entire growing season. So as we look at today, the remnants of that big upper air storm has now moved off to the eastern seaboard. We do have a weak troughing pattern moving through. This is going to bring in and usher a little bit of cool air, particularly as we go through the overnight hours and into tomorrow. High pressure is trying to push into the region. The cold front should enter our region as we go into tomorrow, but ahead of this we do see a little bit of a light snowfall activity and some heavier precipitation down to our south. We see that system really energize and strengthen as we go into Sunday. High pressure builds into the region. This low pressure system will be riding up the eastern seaboard, causing some, once again, another significant weather maker. Heavy precipitation down the southeast, snow to the north, and it looks like eastern Nebraska might just be brushed by some light accumulations less than an inch. As we go on the day on Monday, that trough moves out, low pressure starts to move in, but there is nothing in the way of any significant moisture or support in the upper atmosphere to get precipitation going. As that main system moves up the eastern seaboard, we should start to see a warming trend, and that will only intensify as we get into Tuesday with very warm conditions in western Nebraska, close to normal in eastern Nebraska. Once again, under the influence of high pressure aloft with the main low pressure systems to our southwest. As we go on the day on Wednesday, we see that activity starting to enter the western United States. The eastern storm is starting to spin off toward the open Atlantic, and high pressure firmly in control. We might even see some 70s as we get into the day on Wednesday, particularly over southern and western Nebraska. We see a series of low pressure systems, but these are very diffuse. The main upper air low and surface low will be entering California on Wednesday with that precipitation, and this system really digs deep. And this may be very good news for the southwestern United States and southern Rockies, as the moisture is going to be much farther south than it has been, with surface lows over the entire Great Basin region, and precipitation starting to make its way into Arizona and New Mexico on Thursday. Now as we get in the day Friday, that low pivots to western Texas. We're going to have some very high winds to deal with, and moisture will start to feed toward the north. It looks like low pressure will form in eastern Colorado, and another secondary low pressure system in southern Nevada will keep the precipitation going, heavy at times in the southwestern United States, and this system will eventually start to make its way out into the plains regions as we go late into next weekend. The models are all over the place on how this is going to be treated, but it does look like there will be some impactful weather someplace in the central plains. 8 to 14-day forecast shows below normal temperatures from next Thursday to the following Tuesday with that upper air low, and in terms of precipitation, broad area of above normal precipitation.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews are available individually on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on cattle markets, market strategies for both corn and soybeans, an update on the Argentine Drought, and the Women in Agriculture Conference. As always, you can keep up with Market Journal during the week by following us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Next week, Elaine Cubb will be our market analyst, and Tara Hartman will discuss her UNL research on bacterial leaf streak. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Bridget Nelson.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.